On the far southern edge of Alaska's Kenai Peninsula, swallowed by a relentless green wilderness, lies a ghost town. Its name is Portlock today. All that's left are the skeletal ruins of a cannery, collapsed homes, and rusted equipment sinking back into the earth. No one has lived here for over 70 years, but this isn't just a story of economic collapse. According to local legend, this is a story of fear. This is the story of a community that was hunted into extinction. Around 1950, the last resident of Portlock fled, marking the final act in the town's complete abandonment. The legend says they were running from something that stalked the dark woods surrounding their homes, a predator that supposedly left mutilated bodies and giant, unexplainable footprints in its wake. They had a name for it, the Nantinaq. For decades, this creature has been blamed for a string of violent deaths and terrifying disappearances. But what really happened in Portlock? Was it a monster, a case of mass hysteria, or could the legend be a chilling cover-up for a series of gruesome, unsolved murders? Long before it was a name synonymous with fear, the area was known as Port Chatham, named by a British captain in 1786. For centuries, the land was home to the Sugpiaq or Alutiiq people, who knew both the abundance and the dangers of this isolated landscape. Even then, the area had a shroud of mystery. Early European explorers reported finding native villages that were eerily abandoned, and some of their own crew fell sick with mysterious illnesses that seemed to come from the land itself. Despite these unsettling historical footnotes, the turn of the 20th century brought new life to the bay. A salmon cannery was built, and the town of Portlock was born, drawing in fishermen, loggers, and their families. It was a small, tight-knit community carved into the vast Alaskan wild. By 1921, Portlock was bustling enough to get its own post office, a symbol of its permanence. For a time, it seemed like a perfect slice of the Alaskan dream, but the shadows that flickered at the edge of the forests held old stories. The land hadn't forgotten. The Alutiiq people had a name for an ancient figure that dwelled in the mountains, a name that would soon be whispered in the streets of Portlock itself. Nantinaq. The native law of the Kenai Peninsula had always spoken of the Nantinaq. The name, which some attribute to the Dena'ina language, is often translated as those that steal people. It was described as a massive, hairy, half-man, half-beast that walked on two legs and possessed terrifying strength. For generations, it was a cautionary tale about respecting the wilderness. It was said to be a solitary, territorial creature of the deep forest, and a danger to any who trespassed. But were these just stories? As far back as 1867, there are reports of a Sugpiaq community in the area being attacked by what they called hairy men, or Nantinaq. The stories claim these attacks were so persistent that the village was eventually abandoned. When the cannery brought new people to Portlock in the early 1900s, it seemed the stories were waiting. Unsettling events began to happen. A lone hunter would go into the mountains and not return. A logger would go missing. At first, these were dismissed as the usual dangers of Alaskan life. People get lost. Bears attack. The wilderness consumes. But the pattern felt too frequent to ignore. One story, though not confirmed in historical archives, claims that in 1905 a group of Aleut fishermen wrote a letter to a magazine saying a hairy man was frightening them so badly they had to leave. Throughout the 1920s, loggers reported finding entire trees ripped from the ground by some incredible force. The whispers were growing louder. The tales of a monster in the woods were no longer just old legends. For the people of Portlock, they were becoming a terrifying reality. The stories that came out of the 1930s and 40s paint a picture of a town under siege. While official records from the era are sparse, a fact that only deepens the mystery, the local accounts passed down through generations are horrifying. Official reports list few, if any, unusual deaths, but residents claim the true number of people lost to the woods was more than 30. The tales described brutal violence that defied easy explanation. Hunters would vanish with their bodies remains, supposedly discovered later, washed into the lagoon. The remains were said to be horrifically mutilated, torn apart in a way that local trappers swore was not the work of a bear or any known predator. Perhaps the most infamous story is that of a logger named Andrew Kamluck in 1931. The legend says he was found dead in the forest, killed by a massive blow to the head from a piece of heavy logging equipment. The chilling detail that has echoed through the decades is that the equipment was allegedly far too heavy for a single person to have lifted. It's a terrifying story, but it's important to note there is no official historical record of this event. As the years went on, alleged sightings of the creature increased. Fishermen and miners reported seeing a huge, hairy beast stalking the shorelines. It was described as a towering figure that walked upright and moved with unnerving speed. Hunters, while tracking moose, claimed they stumbled upon enormous, 18-inch long, human-like footprints pressed deep into the mud. The creature was also blamed for smashing fish wheels, essential for the town's livelihood, as if in a display of power. The fear was no longer just in the woods, it had crept into the town itself. The stories of something terrifying in the woods were mounting, from mutilated bodies to eyewitness accounts of an impossible creature. The people of Portlock were living in a nightmare, and the worst was yet to come. If you find yourself drawn to the world's dark corners and unsolved mysteries, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We explore stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what we uncover next. By the end of the 1940s, life in Portlock had become incredibly difficult. The legend says it was constant fear that eroded the community's spirit, but there was another, more practical problem. The town was becoming economically unviable. The breaking point wasn't a single event, but a slow, agonising realisation. Whether it was fear of a monster or the fear of economic ruin, they couldn't stay. The decision to leave was an act of survival. The abandonment of Portlock, which culminated around 1950, wasn't so much an organised evacuation as a gradual flight. Families packed what they could and left behind their homes and the lives they had built. The stories describe a town emptying out, with some families so terrified they wouldn't spend another night in that place. The post office, the heart of any small American town, officially closed its doors for good in 1951, the final admission that Portlock was dead. The people scattered, most moving to the nearby villages of Nantinaq and Port Graham, carrying their traumatic stories with them. They left behind a ghost town, a collection of empty buildings left to the mercy of the harsh Alaskan weather. They left it all to the forest and the legends it held. For 70 years, Portlock has remained a ghost town, slowly being reclaimed by nature. It has become a place of legend, a dark tourism spot for the brave, and the subject of intense debate, what really drove an entire town to flee. While the legend of the Nantinaq is the most dramatic explanation, it's not the only one. The most practical theory is economic. Around that time, the Alaska Route 1 highway was built, creating new economic hubs on the other side of the Kenai Peninsula. Portlock, accessible only by sea, became hopelessly isolated. Many argue that residents simply left for better jobs and easier lives, and the monster story was a colourful legend that grew over time to explain the abandonment. This sceptical view is bolstered by the lack of official records. Researchers who have combed through archives have found almost nothing to back up the claims of dozens of murders or mutilated bodies. Some accounts from former residents even contradict the monster narrative. One descendant claimed her own cousin invented the story of the Nantinaq because she got tired of outsiders asking why the town was abandoned. Could the story of a killer Bigfoot have been fabricated or exaggerated? Or, as some have theorised, could Portlock have been home to a human serial killer, with the Nantinaq being a convenient scapegoat for crimes too horrific for the community to face? The mystery of Portlock is far from forgotten. In fact, the legend has only grown, inspiring new generations of investigators. The story is now a staple of paranormal podcasts and television shows. Most notably, the Discovery Channel series Alaskan Killer Bigfoot brought Portlock back into the spotlight. The show followed a team, including descendants of the original residents, as they returned to the abandoned village to search for concrete evidence of the creature, one of the show's stars. Keith Seville, a descendant of those who fled, admitted that while he started as a skeptic, his experiences there convinced him that there's something out there. Beyond television, the oral tradition remains incredibly strong. Elders in the nearby communities where Portlock's refugees settled continue to pass down the stories of what their ancestors experienced. These aren't just campfire tales, they are treated as a vital part of their history, a warning embedded in their cultural memory. The story lives on, not just as a monster hunt, but as a deeply ingrained part of Alutiiq heritage. So what truly emptied the town of Portlock? Was this community hunted into oblivion by a territorial Bigfoot-like creature? Or is the truth more mundane? Did the town simply fall victim to economic change, its story later embellished into a terrifying folktale? Or could the legend have been a convenient cover for a human monster who stalked the woods for 2 decades? The physical evidence is lost to time. The official records are silent. All that remains are the crumbling ruins and the powerful, enduring stories of those who fled. The tale of Portlock forces us to confront the blurry line between history and legend, between what we can prove and what we fear. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that leave behind more questions than answers.